He was a U.S. Army colonel on the most important mission of his life, escorting a fallen soldier home to his family. But when he tried to board his flight, the airline refused. They cited policy, but the other passengers saw something else, a hero being disrespected. And in that moment, they started recording, they started speaking up, and they turned a quiet injustice into a viral firestorm the airline would deeply regret. While the specifics of this story are a powerful dramatization of a soldier's worst nightmare, it's inspired by very real events and a frustration felt by military families across the country. It's a story about a promise, a nation's debt to those who serve, and what happens when ordinary people refuse to stay silent. Section 1, A Solemn Duty. There are missions, and then there are duties. A mission is an objective, a task to be completed. But a duty is a sacred trust. It's a weight you carry in your soul. For a man like Colonel David Carter, a 30-year veteran of the United States Army, that distinction was crystal clear. Colonel Carter had commanded troops in the dust-choked deserts of the Middle East and navigated the delicate world of military diplomacy. He wore his experience not with arrogance, but with the quiet confidence of a man tested by fire. The ribbons on his uniform weren't just for show, they were a roadmap of his life, each one a testament to putting service before self. But this duty was different. It carried a unique kind of weight, a profound silence that drowned out all the noise around it. He wasn't leading a charge or planning a campaign. He was escorting Private First Class Jason Reynolds home. Private Reynolds was 21. Just a kid, really. A young man who had raised his right hand and sworn an oath to a nation and an ideal. He had a family waiting. A mother with his football picture on the mantelpiece, a father who taught him how to fish, and a sister looking forward to college advice. They were waiting for their son, their brother. And Colonel Carter was the man entrusted to bring him to them. This journey began thousands of miles away, on a foreign airfield, with a procedure known as a dignified transfer. It's a somber, precise, and deeply respectful ritual. It isn't called a ceremony, because families aren't expected to attend a public event during their most private grief. As Private Reynolds's flag-draped transfer case was carried by a team of his fellow soldiers, moving with practiced, reverent precision, Colonel Carter stood at attention, his salute sharp and steady. Every detail is an act of respect. The flags are inspected, the carry teams wear white gloves, and they move in perfect, silent unison. It's a mission of perfection for a warrior's last journey home. It's a promise kept, no one gets left behind. That promise was the core of Colonel Carter's being. You don't leave your brother on the battlefield, and you certainly don't leave him on the long, quiet journey home. He'd spoken to Private Reynolds's mother just the day before. Her voice, trembling with grief, had cut through the phone. She told him stories about Jason, about his laugh, his promise to call her every Sunday. He'd always say, "Mama, I'm keeping America safe so you can sleep peacefully," she whispered. And Colonel Carter made her a promise in return. "I promise you, ma'am," he'd said, his own voice thick with emotion, "I'll bring your son home with every ounce of honor he deserves." That promise echoed in his mind as he arrived at the bustling airport. The terminal was another world. Kids laughing, business travelers barking into their phones, families buzzing about vacations. It was a picture of the very life Private Reynolds had died to protect. The contrast was jarring. Colonel Carter wasn't looking for attention. He just needed a simple measure of respect. He approached the check-in counter, placing his military orders on the polished surface, ready to complete the final step of his duty. He had no idea that this simple act was about to become a battle. He didn't know the promise he'd made to a grieving mother was about to be challenged, not by an enemy, but by a smiling face and a single, devastating word, policy. Section 2, The Confrontation. The airline agent behind the counter wore a practiced, professional smile. Her name tag read, Sarah. At first, she barely glanced up, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Colonel Carter stood patiently, laying his documents on the counter, his military ID and the official orders authorizing him as the special escort for the remains of Private First Class Jason Reynolds. The agent's typing stopped. She frowned at her screen, then at the papers, and finally, up at the colonel. That tiny pause changed everything. It was a flicker of hesitation, a shift that told him she'd run into something outside her script. When she looked back, the professional smile was gone, replaced by a look of strained firmness. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, her voice a little too high. "There seems to be an issue. We can't allow you to board at this time." The words just hung there. Colonel Carter took a slow, deliberate breath. "Ma'am, there has to be a misunderstanding. I am escorting the remains of a fallen soldier. Here are my orders. Everything is in order." He tapped a finger on the paperwork, a quiet command to look again, to understand. But she wouldn't meet his eyes. "I understand, sir, but a security protocol is in place. We're unable to override it." "Security protocol?" Carter repeated, his voice still level, but now with a sharp edge. The idea that a commercial airline's protocol could overrule a Department of Defense directive for a dignified transfer was absurd. "What security protocol, exactly?" "It's just policy, sir," she said. The phrase was a shield, a way to end the conversation and deflect responsibility. Behind him, the line was getting restless. People were sighing, shifting their weight. He could feel their eyes on his back. But he wouldn't move. His mission wasn't to get Jason Reynolds home if it was convenient. It was to get him home. Period. The supervisor arrived, a man with tired eyes and a suit to match. He listened with a practiced air of concern as Colonel Carter explained the situation again, calmly and precisely. "Sir, as my colleague explained, we have certain policies," the supervisor began, his tone condescendingly patient. "It's an extra security measure. Nothing personal. Nothing personal." The colonel's jaw tightened. "Son, I am escorting a United States soldier who gave his life for this country. This is not luggage. It is a hero. And you're telling me policy prevents me from completing my duty?" The supervisor shifted uncomfortably. He was a cog in a machine, trained to follow a flowchart. The colonel, with his unwavering resolve, didn't fit into any of his boxes. So he and his agent hid behind vague words, choosing to ignore duty and deny dignity. And that choice began to change the air in the terminal. The annoyed chatter in the line died down. People were no longer just irritated, they were watching. Listening. They saw the ribbons on his chest, the resolute set of his jaw, and the flustered airline staff. The injustice was becoming palpable. A man a few spots back, wearing a USMC hat, spoke up. "Sir," he said to the supervisor, "do you have a problem with his military clearance?" The supervisor shot him an irritated look. "No, sir. We just have to follow protocol." The Marine let out a sharp, incredulous breath. "Protocol? I've seen escorts come through here 100 times. There is no protocol that says a soldier can't bring his fallen brother home." "What's the real reason?" The supervisor had no answer. The facade was cracking. This was no longer a private matter. The disrespect was now on public display, an insult not just to the colonel, but to the uniform, the flag, and the memory of the young man who had made the ultimate sacrifice. Section 3, The Uprising. What started as a quiet injustice was quickly starting to boil. The impatient sighs in the terminal had been replaced by focused, angry stares aimed right at the airline counter. The Marine veteran who'd spoken up took a step forward. "Let me get this straight," the Marine said, his eyes locked on the supervisor. "You have a colonel of the United States Army, in uniform, on official orders, escorting a fallen American soldier. And you're telling him no? Your airline's policy is more important than that. Did I get that right?" The supervisor, now visibly sweating, stammered, "Sir, we appreciate his service, but we have procedures." Procedures. The Marine shot back. Your job is to get people from point A to point B. His job is to uphold a sacred promise. Don't you dare talk to him about procedures. And then, it happened. The defining sound of our time. The soft chime of a phone starting a video recording. A young woman a few feet away had her phone up, its small red light glowing. Then another went up. And another. Within seconds, a dozen smartphones were aimed at the counter, a constellation of digital witnesses. The airline staff, once shielded by their authority, were now trapped in the glare of 100 tiny lenses. I just posted it, the woman announced to the crowd. They just denied a U.S. Army colonel his flight while escorting a fallen soldier. Hashtag let him fly. A murmur went through the crowd as people pulled out their own phones, not just to record, but to share. To amplify. The story was no longer contained within the terminal. It was a spark that had jumped onto the vast, dry prairie of the internet, and it was catching fire. The supervisor, realizing he was at the center of a PR nightmare, made a frantic call on his radio. But it was too late. The narrative belonged to the people now. Another passenger, a woman holding her young son's hand, spoke directly to Sarah, the agent who started it all. How could you? My brother is in the Navy. Do you have any idea what this man is doing? The sacrifice that was made? Sarah stood frozen, her face pale. The corporate script was useless against this wave of raw, genuine outrage. She'd become the villain in a story being broadcast to the world in real time. Colonel Carter had remained silent through it all, a composed anchor in the storm. This was no longer about him. It was about the principle. It was about Private Reynolds. The people in that airport, the retired Marine, the young student, had formed a spontaneous and powerful honor guard around his mission. Moments later, a man in an expensive suit hurried toward the gate. His badge identified him as a senior corporate representative. His smile was wide and frantic. Colonel Carter, he said, extending a hand the colonel didn't take. A terrible misunderstanding. We sincerely apologize. Of course, we can get you on your flight immediately. First class. Our apologies. The colonel looked past him, at the crowd, at the phone still recording. He then turned his gaze back to the executive. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise. I appreciate the urgency, he said. But if no one had recorded this, if that Marine hadn't spoken up, would I still be standing here? Silence. The executive's smile faltered. They both knew the answer was no. I don't need first class, the colonel continued, his voice ringing with moral authority. I don't need special treatment. I need respect. And so does the soldier I'm escorting. The crowd murmured in agreement. The airline had made a decision. And now, the people were making theirs. Section 4, the resolution. The airline executive stood speechless, his offer of a first-class ticket now looking like the pathetic bribe it was. He tried to put out a fire with a thimble of water, and now the entire narrative was lost to him. The fallout for the airline was immediate. The videos went supernova online. News outlets picked up the story, with brutal headlines, U.S. Army colonel denied flight while escorting fallen soldier. The airline's social media was buried under an avalanche of condemnation. Veterans organizations issued blistering statements, and politicians demanded accountability. The CEO was forced to issue a public apology, calling it a regrettable misunderstanding, and announcing the employees involved were on administrative leave. But the public saw through it. The damage was done, a direct consequence of a moral failure. And while the viral story of Colonel Carter is a dramatization, the injustice it portrays is painfully real. In 2022, the family of a real fallen Marine, Private First Class Zach Riffle, reported a similarly crushing experience with American Airlines. They had gathered to receive their son's remains, a moment of profound grief and honor, but were denied the customary access to watch his plane land on the tarmac. Instead, the family said they were confined to a small break room, feeling disrespected by an airline that cited staffing shortages and policy. His stepmother, Jen Plum, described the feeling as crushing, saying, "It felt like having something stolen from us and we can't ever get that back." American Airlines later apologized and said they were reviewing the matter, but for the Riffle family, the moment was gone forever. These incidents, both the dramatized accounts that go viral and the verified news reports, touched the same raw nerve. They highlight a disconnect between corporate procedure and basic human decency. The fictional Colonel Carter eventually completed his duty. He stood beside Private Reynolds's family as they received their son, and he presented the folded flag to Jason's mother. He kept his promise. But the real lesson came from the airport. It showed that respect shouldn't require a viral video. Honor shouldn't require public outrage. It should be the standard. The story of what happened at that airport, and what happened to the Riffle family, reveals that justice isn't always automatic. Often, it's something we have to demand. Conclusion. In the end, this was never about an airline ticket. It was about a fundamental standard. Respect is not a privilege to be granted by a corporation, it's a debt owed to those who serve. Honor isn't a line item in a policy manual, it's the bedrock of a nation's character. The people in that terminal, in that dramatized moment of justice, proved that a single voice can become a chorus. Real families, like the Riffles, have shown us the devastating cost when that standard isn't met. Justice isn't always served by those in authority. Sometimes, it's delivered by ordinary people who refuse to look away. And that is a promise as sacred as any other. CTA. Subscribe for more true stories of resilience, justice, and powerful transformation.